Category 3 or above on the Safford-Simpson scale.
Okay.
This is Category 1, not quite a Category 2.
It's been in an area that was affected just last year with Luis and Marilyn. What's the difference between the two?
Those are both major hurricanes, over 111 miles an hour. Those, both Luis and Marilyn, much more powerful than this hurricane.
And for a lot of folks, especially on the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, they were just in the rebuilding process from last year and now faced with this. But I guess if there is any light at the end of the tunnel, it was not a Luis or Marilyn again this time.
Right, and the good news is there that conditions are beginning to subside. The hurricane has already moved past, moving to the west, and conditions are improving. Well,
let's describe for our audience where it is now, where it's expected to go. The very latest information puts it at 18.9 north, 65.4 west. And again, John, when we give that information out, that is not the only place it's affected by the storm, but instead that's the center portion of the low pressure associated with the hurricane. The effects of this hurricane can be felt much wider out.
Yes, they can. As a matter of fact, the winds, when we look at the winds, the gale force winds or tropical storm force winds extend out now over 200 miles away from the center of the hurricane. So yes, the point that we give is the exact center of the hurricane, and we mustn't think of a hurricane as being a point. It covers a finite area. The average diameter of a hurricane is about 300 miles or so.
So definitely making an impact much farther than that central point we're giving.
Yes, it is.
50 miles northeast of San Juan, 90-mile-an-hour winds, moving west-northwest at 17. That's had some fluctuation in the last 24 hours, but central pressure down to 976 millibars.
976, and that is getting stronger as time goes by.
And that will continue as we have been tracking to move on off towards the west-northwest. John, here's the winds. We were describing how far out they extend with the tropical force and hurricane winds. Give us the update on this.
And a little bit of good news is, Dennis, you notice as we look at this, it's not exactly symmetrical. We have the tropical storm force winds extending out farther to the north than they are to the south. And the red you see in the center, that's the hurricane force winds, and they extend out about, 120 miles or so.
So they are definitely brushing the area around San Juan and eastern Puerto Rico.
But the one thing that we have seen in the last couple hours is that a little bit more of a jog toward the northwest, and that is keeping the center offshore Puerto Rico. And it looks very much to us now as this continues to move on toward the west and west-northwest during the night, that the eye will stay north of Puerto Rico.
With that in mind, the movement and the strength, I see the watches and warnings have been expanded north and west.
These were expanded about 5 o'clock, and they were discontinued. First of all, the warnings were discontinued for all the Leeward Islands. They were changed off from a watch to a warning for Turks and Caicos and for the southern Bahamas. But in the central Bahamas, a new hurricane watch has been put up, and I think we can anticipate that as time goes on, that some of these watches will be extended even farther northwest.
Satellite perspective tells the story.
It shows it's very well organized. We're looking at the St. Thomas and St. John's right in here. This is the Acas here, the eastern tip of Puerto Rico. And the eye of the hurricane is up here now just north of the very eastern tip of Puerto Rico and moving toward the west-northwest, as we indicated, about 17 miles per hour.
I know we're finding squalls of rain already being reported from San Juan. This radar return out of the San Juan radar shows the eye quite distinctly.
See the eye very well, and you can also see that some pretty heavy showers are impacting most of Puerto Rico, maybe not quite all the island yet. But remember that the radar site is up here at San Juan on the north coast, and there are mountains there, and the radar doesn't always pick up what's going on in the south and the southwest portion.
And in fact, knowing about that hilly terrain and the amount of rainfall that may be coming down, we may experience some mudslides and flooding problems in Puerto Rico.
I think very likely we will. We know that we've already had several inches of rain already in Puerto Rico. More is in the offing, and so that does cause the possibility, in fact, the probability of flash flooding and mudslides. Also, we want to point out that up there in the mountains at higher levels in an exposed area, the wind is going to be higher than it is down at sea level.
So they may experience something like 80 or 90 at sea level, maybe well over 100 miles an hour in the higher peaks.
That is very likely.
Okay, and a visible shot, I want to show them one more satellite perspective, John, and you can definitely see where the eye is. You can also see the darkness of the day moving in as well.
And the sun is setting there, and that's why that kind of fades out at the last picture. But you can see the center of circulation showing up very well indeed, and now you can see the clouds extending well out ahead of the center of the hurricane, beginning to reach the western tip of Hispaniola.
And the top of the screen showing the feathery appearance of the outflow, indicating that it does have some some strength in the upper levels as well.
That is what we look for, because in order to set up the mechanism for a hurricane to thrive and to flourish, you have to have outflow in the upper atmosphere, and the satellite pictures are showing us that the outflow is quite well developed.
Now, I'm sure there's many voices out there. I can hear them now. They're saying, John, I live in the southeast part of the United States. I'm watching this very closely. I hope that is not me. What should I do in preparation for that?
Well, we're not ready to say yet that it's definitely going to impact the United States, but we are willing to say it's going to get very close. So if you're in that area in the southeastern part of the United States, now is the time to get out there and put in the supplies that you need to, for example, to board up your house, emergency supplies to have in the house in case the power goes off, and so on.
Update your medication, your prescriptions.
Medication is very important. That all has to be in order, and you have to be able to grab it in a hurry.
Okay, very good. And thank you, John, for keeping us updated and informed on the very latest with Hurricane Bertha as it continues to trudge on off towards the west-northwest. Declan Cannon standing by in our anchor studio to bring us up to date on what
blow today at the island of Puerto Rico and in San Juan. As you can see, the wind and the rain causing serious problems as far as some minor damage and some signs blown down. Lots of rainfall, 4 to 8 inches of rain. And now we're still seeing some gusty winds, but the pressure is rising rapidly over the northern part of the island. And as you can see here at the Travel Lodge, part of that sign was blown down. Really just a glancing blow. The peak wind gust reported at San Juan Airport was only just above 60 miles an hour. Now, it may have been a little windier up on some of the mountaintops. And unfortunately, one fatality so far, one fatality, a surfer from New York City, did not heed the warnings and so far has not been found, assumed lost at sea. We also have a report from ham radio operators that a Venezuelan ship is drifting in the midst of the hurricane off the coast and that half of the 42 people on board are missing. The Coast Guard trying to locate them, but so far have not had much luck. But you can see the wind whipping through the island of Puerto Rico this afternoon. Now, earlier today, wind gusts as high as 103 miles an hour over the Virgin Islands. The weather is improving dramatically as Bertha pulls away from the coast. Now, this has been a very unusual storm because it formed off the east coast of Africa, and we've been following it for a couple of days, becoming a hurricane last night, and then going right through the Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands this morning, and now sitting off to the north of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Latest advisory puts it at 45 miles north of San Juan, but we're going to have another advisory here momentarily. We should have an update on that because obviously now, as we'll show you, it's farther north than that. Winds are 90 miles an hour, so it's still a Category 1 hurricane, but we do think that it will increase to a Category 2 overnight because it's moving over open water. The water is warm, and this is just what Bertha needs to strengthen. Pressure continues to fall, too, now down to 971 millibars. The wind field, hurricane-force winds off to the north and northeast to the center, still getting some tropical force wind gust over Puerto Rico, but the weather as a whole is improving. The rain will be diminishing later on this evening, and life will get back to normal. This certainly was no Luis or Marilyn through the Virgin Islands. Remember last year, Category 3 and Category 4 hurricanes doing substantial damage, fatalities, and we've been very fortunate with this one. So far, Bertha is just a Category 1. But hurricane warnings continue for Puerto Rico, and also as far north and east as the Turks and Caicos, north coast of Haiti, and now the central Bahama Islands are under hurricane watches. Now, these watches here were extended north and west into the central Bahamas late this afternoon, and with a continued track off to the northwest, we'll probably see these watches extended farther off to the north and west later on tonight, if not first thing on Tuesday morning. Take a look at the strike probability. Now, those of you on the southeast coast, I know, are getting a little antsy. Everybody in Florida getting certainly their act together, and that's good. We still cannot make a definitive statement on where Bertha is going to end up. There's several scenarios. There was a trough approaching from the east. Now, if you remember last summer, that trough really helped us on the east coast because it really steered all those major hurricanes, including Luis and Marilyn, away from the eastern seaboard. We're not sure. It's not etched in stone that that's going to happen this time. And certainly by this time tomorrow, we should have a better idea on the strike probability for southeast Florida and anywhere on the eastern seaboard. But if you're watching east coast of Florida right up through Georgia and the Carolina beaches, stay with the Weather Channel. We'll have continuing coverage, and we will certainly give you the latest from the Hurricane Center as we receive it. Here's the latest infrared picture, and you can see the eye now popping up on the latest picture. We weren't able to see that over the past couple of hours, and we've seen the eye wall kind of get tighter. So this is a sure sign that Bertha is now intensifying as it moves off to the northwest. This is the Mona Passage here. This is the north coast of the Dominican Republic, and some big resorts over here around Puerto Plata. We've got Nagua, some towns here, but it's going to probably go off to the north and west, and again, the Dominican Republic will miss the brunt of Hurricane Bertha. Next question is, what happens after that? And that certainly remains to be answered, but again, if you're in the southeast coast of the United States watching tonight, stay with us. We'll keep you posted. Radar clearly shows you the eye of Hurricane Bertha and those heavier rain bands associated with the eye wall off to the north and off to the northeast. But notice if you're watching from San Juan or anywhere in Puerto Rico that most of the rain is over with and the weather is going to be improving dramatically through this evening. We'll have continuing coverage on Hurricane Bertha, and certainly the possibility of a landfall in the U.S. is not out of the question, but it's just a little too early to give you any kind of idea of where that will be if that certainly does occur. A lot of things have to be looked at in the next 24 hours. In the meantime, we check in on the rest of the weather.
You don't have the surge that you do on the mainland. The water tends to move